ICS4C, lesson 4.1. Start of the end. This is our first lesson on our last unit, Unit 4, which is on GUI. GUI stands for Graphical User Interface. And when we discuss GUI, we generally mean a collection of elements that allow us to gather information from the user. Everything we've been doing in computer class has been graphical user interface mostly because we're doing web pages. Things are graphical. But what we're talking about here are a collection of tools like text boxes and buttons and radio buttons and check boxes. This is language that's used throughout all computer science, whether it's web page design or whether it's Java or C++ or all sorts of things. So when we're talking about graphical user interface, we're talking about the stuff that we're going to be talking about in this chapter. We'll see that it starts off, most of our web page GUI is HTML again. For a couple of days we'll put our JavaScript aside, and then we'll bring it back in, the JavaScript and the jQuery. In our HTML we include a form in the body of an HTML document with a tag. So form is where all this stuff actually gets written. All this GUI stuff gets written, and it looks like this. Now I'm going to show you kind of as a side note, I'm going to show you a new tool. This is called JS Fiddle, which is kind of like JS Bin, but it's JS Fiddle. And JS Fiddle is kind of a nice interface, I think, where it's a little more complicated, maybe a little more. I think it's a little more nice. It's mature. When I type a start tag, it automatically closes my tag and then indents for me in the right spot and all that sort of thing. So my stuff goes here. Why we didn't use JS Fiddle right away is because there's no console. Okay, there's no console. This is kind of like our output screen, and when I run this, the stuff goes here. Actually, that's actually text. I thought I was doing a comment. I did a JavaScript comment. There's my HTML comment. I lost my mind there for a moment. There's my HTML comment. And so this is the output page, and I can kind of control the size of this a little bit better than in JS Bin. You can sign up, and it'll save all your JS fiddles for you. You can share it with people so more than one person can work on a certain project. It's kind of nice, but it also doesn't have a console built in, and that was trouble for when we started in grade 11. If you try JS Fiddle, you don't like it, I don't care. It doesn't matter. You can use JS Bin, JS Fiddle, Notepad++, whatever you feel comfortable with. And so the form, this business is, we're going to be dealing in between these two tags because that's where we get our form elements. All right, what's the first form element, first GUI element that we're going to do is a text input. And we've actually seen this on Code Academy. A text box allows us to get short string information from the user. By the way, you're not copying this. I hope you went to Edmodo and grabbed a copy of this Smart Notebook file, because you can add to this file, but there's quite a bit of typing the next couple of days, and I'm just going to give you the files, and you can add to them. So a text box is an input HTML tag. The type is text, and I'll talk about the ID and all that business in a second, but I'll show you how that works. Right, and then all of a sudden, bam, I've got a text box, and I can type in my text box if I like. Nothing really happens. See, it says please use post request. That's an error message from the website. When I pressed enter, I didn't tell it what to do, so it doesn't know what to do. But if I run it again, my text box shows up. The ID is exactly what we remember from CSS, from JavaScript. This is an ID that we can style using CSS. We can use in our JavaScript later once we do that. And you'll see that I'm going to get in the habit of adding an ID to all of my form elements. This is a text box. Optionally, we can add a placeholder and autofocus attributes to some form elements to change their appearance and behavior. I'm going to let you goof around with this mostly. These optional businesses, after I show you them once, I'm not going to show you them all the time, but if I put in autofocus, and notice this doesn't have a value, but if I were to run that, you see how it's blue? It's kind of like your web page. This is what you do. If I just start typing, I don't have to click. Where if there I go. If I didn't have that in there, it's not highlighted. I have to click in that box. So that's autofocus. Placeholder gives it like a default text. You see how it's kind of grayed out, and as soon as I start typing, it's gone, right? So that's placeholder. There's a lot of these little things that you can make note of in your note. Like I'd leave your note up, and when you're goofing around on your HTML and you find something that's cool, you can add that to your note. I'm not gonna show you all of them. Optionally, this one I will show you because this is a common one. We can add a label and associate it with a particular ID name. And so here's that. There's a label, and notice it's got the attribute name for and then a class there. So when I add that to my HTML, then the for my ID hooks it up there. And I run that, and there's my label, and it knows it's for this text box. So when you got a bunch of text boxes, it's nice to have that label right next to it. Now what's weird, this label looks like complicated code. I can get the very same effect just by deleting that off. Right? It looks exactly the same. So why would I want that extra code? Well, maybe to be more clear, maybe because when it's just whatever like this, I can't edit it dynamically using jQuery. Those are the sorts of reasons that I would want the extra code. And so that's on the bottom of here. You can just add normal text to accomplish a similar effect. Whatever is the label, and that's the text box. These terms, by the way, the label and the text box, are terms that we'll use in our form, but that's across all GUI stuff. We call that a text box and we call that a label. Not exactly revolutionary names. Kind of just makes sense. Grouping form elements. We can group HTML form elements together using field set tags. So here we see the field set. I'm going to copy this into my fiddle just to show you what that looks like. When I pasted it, it had my it had the tabs in there from Smart Notebook, so that's why that goofed up. And see, well, the legend is actually at the same side, and I'll tell you what the legend means. The field set doesn't do anything except for group whatever's inside. That makes that one chunk of your form. One chunk is this field set. And notice I can add styling or class IDs in the field set as well. Let me run that, show you what that looks like. And it puts a box around it to make it visually look different. And notice that these inputs, I could add autofocus, I could add placeholders, I can add labels to all this stuff as well. The legend, that part there gives it a title. That gives it a bunch of stuff title. If I took that out, it looks similar, but it doesn't have a title there. That's what the legend does. There's our output. And again, anytime you want to add some of your own insight to your note, please do that. I think I'm almost done. I think there's one other thing on this video. Text areas. So we said that a text box is a short area. If we want somebody to do a description, like or do some writing, we use a text area to get a larger amount of text. And notice it's a different construction. It's got opening and closing tags, not like the input. And the text area, you can set the size using rows and columns. Notice I have a name there. The name of this text area is paragraph, and we'll talk about names in the next couple of days, but this is the idea of when I give it a name, then I can refer to it in JavaScript. When I give it an ID, I can refer to it in JavaScript for styling or for accessing the information itself. So at some point, we're going to want to grab this text to do something with it. Right now, I can type, but that's it. If I press enter, I get that error message. Well, no, not there, but if I press my enter or I can't, it doesn't do anything. It just, I can type on my web page, but nothing's actually processed. Play around with that, the text areas and this stuff, and the autofocus and the placeholders, all that business you can play around with. Back in the note, if I got any other notes to make. Just in other cases, the ID and name attributes are optional, but allow us access once we use JavaScript or CSS. And that's called a text area. I think that's it. Oh, no, buttons. Buttons are easy, and we've seen them before. We have seen buttons before, and they are easy. Again, we include an ID or name so we can access them later in JavaScript. So we've used buttons quite a bit, right? When we did jQuery, we had buttons that we used so we could get an event. You hit this button, and then this picture disappears, right? So buttons can show up. Notice that when I put the button outside of this field set, that it's outside. This is the field set here, and then the button, well, it doesn't do anything, right? It's saying please use post request. Well, clicking that button doesn't do anything, and it doesn't like that, right? So eventually we're going to need to add some code that it actually does something. Notice there's an ID and a name for these buttons, so when we decide to use JavaScript, we can actually do something with it. There are other types of buttons. Another button uses input tags with a different type. These behave differently than a regular button, but mostly on the JavaScript side of things. So here's a different type of button called a reset button. And again, I'm going to run that. And so click here for a do-over. If I had this and I got some other junk in here, and I've done some work on my web page, and then I want to click for a do-over, then the reset, the input type reset resets. It's almost like it reloads the page. That's what the reset, but that's a pretty cool button, the old reset button. And there are others. I think one of your tasks today is going to be investigating some of the other input types. So notice for a text box, we just had this word was text. We change that to reset, and it ends up being a button. So there's the regular button. There's the reset button. You can check out all of the HTML input type possibilities by clicking on that little planet. So you click on that, that's going to take you to the HTML documentation, and there's lots and lots of cool stuff. And we won't see them all, but I hope you play around with a whole bunch of them. This is the fun part, is all of the different GUI elements that you can do. All right, I think you have some exercises to do. Get at it.